Okay. Calling our Tuesday, November 13th, Parks and Rec Commission to order. All commissioners are present for a quorum, with the exception of Joe Quinn. He's gone tonight. So we are good to proceed. We need to approve the minutes, even though it's not on the agenda.
So work session last time, we didn't have
Yeah.
minutes to approve.
The last two were work sessions, weren't they?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome.
Hello.
All right, well, take it away. So I wanted to share our recap for our Levy Park programming for this summer. Our summer this year for programming was the beginning of June through the beginning of October, with some postponements of events. Other than that, it would have been the end of September. So quick by the numbers for our Levy Park programming, we had 38 events offered to the community, 3,900 people in attendance throughout those 38 events, and then with the Levy Park, there are days to be rented and availability for half-day rentals and full-day rentals, and 27 days were rented at the Levy Park Rotary Pavilion. And with those 38 programs and events, we needed to postpone and then cancel 4 of those events because of unfavorable weather. We live in Minnesota. So with our rentals at the Rotary Pavilion, we saw a lot of different variety there. Most common is our gatherings, so reunions, graduations, birthday parties, some baby showers and such. And then our one-day special events that are approved through City Council, as well as our City Festival Rivertown Days, and then the Rotary Club Concert Rivertown Live that happened this year in September. And then along with that, we had 3 weddings this year. And typically our weddings that we see are smaller, between 20 and 70 people. And the amphitheater itself holds about 300 people. So it's a really good space for that. So with our 38 programs that we had offered, we had 24 free programs and events offered to visitors and community of Hastings, and then 14 fee-based programs, which are your painting or art in the park and fitness programs. So this year for fitness, we offered yoga in the park and trail cardio. And that's a partnership with the YMCA here in Hastings. So funding for our Levy Park programming, City Council allocates $10,000 the last 2 years. Our first year was $15,000. We work with local businesses and organizations for sponsorships, so that's gone up from each year. Our fees collected for art and fitness has gone down this year. We cut our price in half for art in the park. It used to be $20, now it's $10. So we saw an increase in participants, but then a decrease in fees collected, and that's just like the direct fees that we collect. And then our attendance. And again, our attendance for 3,900 versus 47 in 2017 is primarily for those 4 events that we had to postpone, the movies and the music, and the larger events that bring bigger crowds. And I know, Ben, you attended the Party in the Park, Dave, and the Party in the Park was a fun event.
A lot of fun.
We had rain, then sunshine, rain, then sunshine. But here are a few highlights. Our summer kickoff event and our Party in the Park at Levy Park, open to the community and visitors of Hastings, free of charge. We saw over 400 at our summer kickoff and over 300 at our Party in the Park. Make Music Day is our second year of celebrating. It's a worldwide celebration, so there's over 800 cities in the world that celebrate. We had over 720 attendees within 5 parks, and then 10 different groups played free of charge, and it was free to attend. And that was 7 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. This is a full day. Storytime in the Park is one of our really popular events. It's a partnership with Pleasant Hill Library, the children's library in there. So we work in partnership to plan different themes, games, activities, songs, and stories, preferably and recommended for kids under 10 years of age. We see between 100 and 160 attended for Wednesdays at 10:30 in the morning. And this year we tried evenings, and since it was new, we're assuming it was a smaller attendance, but it was between 10 and 30 that attended the evening story times. So definitely the traction for that daytime story time. It might be those caregivers are looking for something to do throughout the weekdays for their kiddos. And performances in the park, we had classical actors on the level, as well as our Children's Castle Theater, and those are performances with one group was about 30 and another group was 74. So they come and perform, and that was funded through sponsorship. As well as our Movies in the Park is funded through sponsorship, Art at Mills. And then we partner with local organizations to ramp it up a little bit. So Tim with Crossroads was a partner the last 2 years. So he has staff come out and they put on free tabling events and crafts and activities for the kids. So it's a really good attraction to get families in earlier and then add a little bit more to their evening. And our Music in the Park, which is very popular as well. We had 3 of those, and one of the biggest feedbacks we saw this year from our survey was more movies and more music, which we saw the last couple of years too.
Does that include like hairball?
Nope, so these are
Is
just
that
levy
something
park, put on by the city, and
Okay.
then special events like Hairball with Rivertown Live and the
Okay.
ALS and Cat Park Kids, and all those other ones are
Oh, okay.
other organizations,
Got it. Got it.
which also bring a lot of people to Levy Park and using our facilities. So our outreach platforms that I work closely with our communications coordinator, Lee Stoffel. We try to reach people in many different avenues, and we're still trying to navigate through those different platforms. So variety include hard copy and then also electronic. So we try to reach people where they view their source, whether it's Facebook, our website, our text alert system that you can sign up for, just the general programming poster that's posted throughout the city of Hastings, and then our local media partners, Hastings Star Gazette, KWA, HCTV, and then the Hastings Chamber website. I know that we've been really trying to push that within the city, and with the Chamber and Tourism Bureau for having our community events calendar and having everyone go there for when people visit Hastings, and that's kind of like a hub of information. So we've been really trying to work close with them and make sure all of our information is up to date and new. So whenever events are postponed or canceled, I connect through all these avenues and make updates and do postponements and reach out to make sure everybody's on the same page and also get the word out for us. So with our outreach in Hastings, Lee, our communications coordinator, provided this information to me. So the spotlight on the Hastings Pavilion and the Riverwalk was an increase in the Facebook reach, and then as well as the impressions that we're seeing, and then an increased number of event responses that came through. And then she also created more consistent, cohesive marketing look for all of our Facebook event banners that you might see. So for example, Dakota County Parks, they typically have a really consistent look, so we wanted to go towards that to make us more recognizable. And our Instagram, our paid boosts, and then we really try to focus on awareness of Hastings, and even though people might not come, they're still learning, and they're aware, and maybe they tell a friend or a family member, and they get out in our parks. So this is the banners that Lee created for this year, trying to get more of a brand to market our programming in Hastings. So we put out a survey for 2 weeks. We had 64 responses. We put on the website, the Hastings social media pages, and then we connected with our local media partners for responses. And these were just the responses that we received on the survey. A lot of value, I think, comes through that face-to-face interaction when you're at events and programs, and whether you guys talk to the community as commissioners and reach out and see what they're interested in, or the feedback, or whether it's just a, we love this, or hey, what do you think about this? So with these survey results, 67 attended 1 to 4 events, and then the rest of the percentage was 5 or more. Hearing about the programming was primarily the City of Hastings Facebook page, and then the Rivertown newsletter, which comes out quarterly through all of the Hastings residences. And I believe that's like 11,344 for this year. Type of programming, like I mentioned earlier, people really want to see more music and family-friendly events, so we'll take that definitely into consideration, apply that for 2019 programming at Levy Park. The age range, the top 3, 30% was 40 to 49, who took the survey, 27% was 30 to 39, and 19% was that 50 to 59 range, and then primarily in Hastings who took it. And then with all these programs, I think the most important thing is building relationships with our sponsors, with our partners, and with the people that attend our events. So we're more likely to create more awareness around Hastings itself and around our park system and what we have to offer here in our service to our residents. And overall, we are excited to plan for 2019, and I hope that Commission will be a part of that planning process going forward. And that's all I have for you. Questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just
Yeah.
like to say good job because the events I attended were most excellent, and I heard a lot of really positive feedback. The party in the park was my favorite.
Good. Despite the rain.
Despite the rain, I had a blast, and so did my family and everybody else around.
Awesome.
Yep.
And I'll work to be in communication with you guys throughout the season, and then also bring forward to you our drafted calendar as it comes through here in the winter months.
Good.
That's all. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks. Thank you, Mitch.
Sorry.
Tim's just
Big
in the
lug.
way,
Lug.
right?
Big lug.
Yeah.
Well, what if the two tallest guys are sitting on that end?
Dave told me where I was sitting, so he pointed me
Where they
he
were
pointed me
sitting
over
today.
there.
Put the youth up there.
Do you guys want the lights back up?
He-
All good.
Do they need to?
Yeah.
Probably be a
These
little
with the
better.
lights back up? Or? Okay, we're good. Perfect.
Make me fall asleep.
All right, we're gonna go over the park dedication ordinance update. You wanna lead us through that one?
Yes, ma'am, I do. One, thanks, Commission, for working here tonight. I know the accommodations are different than what we're used to, and thanks to Hastings Community TV as well for making this work. The council chambers are under a reconstruction, a renovation of the AV system down there, so when we get back in there, it should be way cool. So we're excited for that, but yeah, thanks to you, thanks to Hastings Community TV for making this work out for us. As Commission is aware, we currently have a public land dedication ordinance. 15407 is the ordinance number if people are interested in looking that up. That, by all indications and notes and stuff that I've been able to gather, that was last visited 2003, 2004 timeframe. And staff are certainly interested in address or revisiting that ordinance now. For a couple of different reasons. One, mainly because the inputs that are used to calculate parkland dedication change over time. So it's prudent to review that on occasion. And in fact, later you'll see that staff is asking this commission to provide a recommendation on time frame for when we should review that ordinance and the inputs that go into that. You'll see that later on. So everybody, I know Commission has a pretty good understanding, but for those that are listening or watching tonight, what a public land dedication ordinance is a mechanism for land to be dedicated to the city for the purposes of creating parks and recreational facilities or natural and open space, or a cash payment can be made in lieu of physical land dedication. That's the way it currently sits right now.
From new development activities, right?
From new development activities, correct, thank you. So this is if there's a new subdivision that comes in south of town but is inside city limits, the theory is, the thought is, the reality is that those new residents will create a new demand for parks and recreation services on Hastings. That's kind of the basics of what public land or parkland, you'll hear me use the two interchangeably, parkland dedication ordinances are. So what I'm looking for tonight is to review the proposed methodologies, which is page 3 of this, for calculating a couple of things. Level of service, which, as we've discussed as a commission, but again for those listening, is the current inventory in number of parks, acres of parkland, in a couple of different classifications: neighborhood parks, community parks, and natural open spaces. We have those 3 very distinct categories of park and parkland here in Hastings, and the current residents have paid for those. The residents that live here now have paid for that at that level of service. So that's what we're calling a level of service. So many acres of parks, so many types of parks, all that sort of stuff. And then calculating the level of service, the physical land dedication requirements, the fee in lieu land, and what would be new, which is a park development fee. The park development fee is a fee that is charged to developers like a fee in lieu of land, but those fees are used exclusively to develop new parks, redevelop existing parks. And I should mention too, all of these are ward specific. Hastings has 4 wards, so the fees that are derived out of a particular ward stay within that ward. So the residents, the idea behind that, right, there's a nexus to it. The residents that live in that ward receive the benefit of it, right, because they were paid in that general geographic area. Parks, especially neighborhood parks, are designed to serve service within a half a mile. Community parks within a couple, 2 or 3 miles. So, again, that's what we're asking the commission to review tonight and approve, actually, those proposed methodologies that are on page 3, I'm sorry. Kind of current steps as well, before we'll go through this example together. Current steps, well, let's go back. What we've done already, a parkland inventory and classification. Much of that has been done by staff. Much of it exists currently with our comp plan. We have that, and we also take a look at GIS data, where some of those, especially the natural and open space areas that are city natural and open space areas, aren't defined within a park necessarily. So there's an inventory of land that we need to account for as well. And we're going to finish and make that accurate and up to date. And then calculating the level of service, right? We kind of discussed that, and we're going to be using, I'm proposing to use Dr. John Crompton's, who is a professor at the Texas A&M University, has done a lot of work around this subject, proposing to use his formulas for creating our levels of service calculations, computations, as well as the physical land dedication, fee in lieu, and park development fees. All very transparent, which is what we're wanting. We've also been able to establish the value of vacant land through the Dakota County Assessor's Office. Vacant and developable land, I should add. Perhaps as part of the ordinance, there could be a suggestion somehow that occasionally we use a land appraisal company to verify those numbers. One, we want to be accurate with that. We don't want to be charging too much or valuing land too much, and we don't want to value it too little. Again, that's why there's a need for that review process. And then simply we're running calculations on all that stuff, and that's how we developed what you'll see here in a moment. Right now, as we talked about last time, we're getting an initial legal review. I've met with the city attorney. He's got all the information that I've got. We're looking at all that. We're looking against, or looking into Minnesota state statute to make sure there's no quirks that we need to work around or with or what have you. So that's in progress right now. And again, asking this commission to approve the methodology for calculating the level of service, as well as the 3 dedication requirements: physical land, fee in lieu, and the park development fee. I want you guys to provide a recommended time frame for ordinance review, and also, recommended time frame within which the fees collected in lieu and the park development fees should be spent. If we collect them, we shouldn't be waiting, the idea behind it. I don't wanna put words in your mouth. If we collect them, we shouldn't be waiting 20 years to spend them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there a current time limit?
There's none.
Is there a recommended time limit based on the gentleman from Texas A&M, his findings?
If I remember correctly, his findings were simply that each community need to address it, right? Everybody's a little bit different rate of growth, looking at comp plans and where future development could be. So one way you can spend some of these funds is land acquisition. If we know or have a really good feeling the city is going to grow this way, you could potentially acquire land now and use some of those funds. So when it comes time and there's a development around it, you can use park development fees to develop that. So there's different ways to do it. And develop and redevelop. So existing parks today can be redeveloped, or portions of this money can be used to redevelop those.
Is there a timeline on the legal review?
I haven't heard back just yet, but I've bothered him once or twice.
Okay. Would our proposed timeline want to kind of go coincide with that, or after that he's done looking at it? Or for reviewing the ordinance?
I think if commission has an idea on what they think for review of the ordinance,
Sure.
and what a time frame for expending those funds is, give me that recommendation.
Okay.
And if we find somehow through the final legal review or council approval that needs to be modified, then we'll do it.
You can change it at that point?
Yep.
Okay.
What are the towns around us doing as far as time frame to spend the funds? Do we know?
Having reviewed many of those, that was not on my list of items that I checked. I can do that.
We didn't even know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. I would have no clue where to start.
Google land dedication ordinance city of.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yes.
At least I would like start with a ballpark, like 2 to 5 years.
What started?
That's
what
exactly
started
what
the
I was
whole-
I was
thinking.
thinking 2 to 5 years.
What's that?
What started the whole process to do the review? Was that your idea, or?
It was a subject that, I've been familiar with for years. And then a few years ago, I went to the National Recreation Park Association conference and I actually sat and listened to Dr. Crompton and provide a PowerPoint show and whatnot, and just get you thinking about your current policies and ordinances.
Sure.
So I started looking at ours and looking for the calculations and trying to get things figured out. And it was just apparent that we needed to, as a community, address the whole thing.
I'm just wondering, as far as to give a basis of, a time frame of when we should have this review done. If it was something city council had said, hey, we really need to look at this soon, instead of you just going, we should probably review this type of thing.
So there's two timelines that we're talking about here. One, time frame for review of the ordinance, review of the inputs, recommendation no more than 3 years, right? So if you're looking at the land values, the population, number of dwelling units, those sorts of things, minimum every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Can it be done more often? Yes. And I think that that's part of what our job is as city staff and commission, is to kind of pay attention to the market. If we know that land values are crashing, then it's fair to take a look and see. We don't want to be charging or have a formula that has a land value twice what it actually is at the given moment.
True.
And the same is true on the flip side. If
You don't wanna
land
be giving
values
it away.
double and
Yeah.
you wait 3 years to address it, then you're going to be shorting
Mhm.
the pot some money.
And there's nothing in the current document that says how often it should be reviewed.
No.
We want to add something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially,
I think so.
what I think we're looking at is an entire rewrite of the ordinance, which isn't terrible. There's plenty of great examples out there, and I think we just get it right. So what we're looking for again tonight is the methodology piece for how we're computing the physical land dedication and the fees. Before we get there, just like I said, an update, a rewrite. This would be next steps. Update and rewrite of the current public land dedication ordinance. There may be an ordinance in addition to. See how that plays out. A final legal review, and then we'd submit a copy to City Council for consideration. So that's kind of the process. Where we were, where we are, we're looking for tonight, where we still have to go. It's not a quick and dirty, it's done tonight type of deal. So, but I wanted to give you guys something that's concrete here you can take some action on tonight, which is those methodologies. And if you guys all want to turn to that page, how we've broken it down here again is just inputting Hastings data into Crompton's layout and formulas.
It looks like you've done it by population. What about doing it by business? Like from a business perspective, because when new development of businesses come in, isn't it totally different numbers? Like how do you relate the businesses to these PPUs? Right? Or PPH?
Persons per household? So are you talking about, say we've got a new business park that pops up and
like
there's multiple businesses out there?
Acreage or...
That, I think, is one of those things that we're discussing in legal review. We currently charge for non-residential lands. We currently charge a park dedication fee, or we currently have a physical land requirement or a cash in lieu of land fee.
So that's outside of that.
That is outside of that.
Because it's a business.
It's one of the things we're going to have to come back with. There's a question right now on, is that appropriate or not? So if the city is to decide that it is, the roughly proportionate question comes in. And so trying to calculate that level of service based on
Type of business.
type
size.
of business, number of employees, acreage, use, all sorts of stuff. And
Totally different than what
Totally
this
different than this.
methodology would be.
This methodology here is
new residential
strictly
developments.
residential. Yep.
Got it.
And I did this, all the information I can find on this persons per household is roughly 2.5, anywhere between like 2.47 and 2.51 persons per household. Whether it's multifamily, single family, doesn't make any difference. Where every type of dwelling unit in Hastings has about the same average persons per household. So that's what these were computed with. If that changes, if data sources change, then we just change it. Right? So that's part of being nimble with this type of ordinance.
And you've got the 3 different areas. Are these additive?
Yes, they would all add together to
Okay.
become one final fee. However,
Per dwelling unit?
they're per dwelling unit, per house built, per whatever. It can come around in a couple of different ways. For instance, when a developer comes to this commission and says, we're going to put this development in, our proposal is to pay you all cash and be done. This commission is charged with reviewing that proposal, reviewing the park and recreation needs of Hastings, and making a decision. Do we take physical land because we have that authority? Or do we recommend that City Council take physical land? Or do we recommend City Council take cash in lieu of land? So not necessarily entirely up to the developer what they want to do. It is commission and ultimately council that decides that. So the fees can come in, it can be, we're going to take the physical land for neighborhood parks. We want cash for community and
Okay.
cash for natural and open spaces.
Got it.
Because of where this is physically located,
Okay.
this makes the most sense. And park development fees for all three.
Okay.
So they all add up, and they can add up in a couple of different ways.
Okay. And so dwelling units, doesn't matter whether it's a condo, a townhouse, a small community home, or a single-family home? They're all
Currently, the
same?
way that it's written, no. And again, it's that persons per household piece.
Yep.
If there was a significant difference in those, it would, the numbers would change and could benefit, it could be a lesser dollar amount, could be a greater dollar amount,
Okay.
depending on what that persons per household is.
But since they're so close right now, it doesn't make sense to
I
kind of
didn't-
split them out.
I didn't think that it made that much of a difference,
I don't
and I
think so.
haven't found a definitive number for
Okay.
multifamily. You get into bigger communities like a St. Paul or a Minneapolis, and they're
Sure.
gonna have different data sets, and some of those are gonna be, they'll have even more like density housing areas, where Hastings has some, we don't have a lot.
A lot.
And that may be one that we have to address too, right, with an apartment complex. What does that mean? Well, we're still average 2.5 people per household. What makes the most sense here? There'll be some other inputs, but I think for almost every residential scenario, this captures it. But ultimately, that's for commission and council to decide. I'm giving you the best pieces of information that I can at this time, and not hiding them.
Also, I mean, how does this change from what was previously set?
What was previously set is the formulation was based upon densities, number of dwelling units per acre, right, was density,
Okay.
which eventually equated to a percentage of the gross land being developed. So it could be 13% of 40 acres is now the land being dedicated. That's the physical land you get because we're in this category. And then the cash in lieu of land would be based on the same thing. It's 13% of the land, and the land costs this much right now.
How is it determined how much the land costs?
In 0304, there was an appraisal of an individual or a couple of neighborhoods
Okay.
that was done.
Okay.
The
We're still
way-
going off of that?
Nope. The prices we have in here, which is $65,000 per acre, is from the Dakota County Assessor's Office. The one number that's not in here that we may have to address too is that 65,000 is for single family, low density. You get into medium to high density, single family, the value of land goes up to $85,000.
Based on past year sales in Dakota County?
In Hastings.
Or in
So it's
Hastings?
Hastings
Okay.
specific,
Okay.
yes. So land sales over the past couple of years,
Okay.
current stuff on the market. That's why I asked the assessors, because they're smarter than me with that stuff.
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions right now? I know you guys have kind of
I'm
heard
just
this stuff
reading.
before. Yeah,
I
read away.
was just reading it.
If you take, you know, the top
Mhm.
part, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, the lines 6 through 10 and 11 through 15 are the same. They just have different numbers in them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a lot better than what we had before.
Okay.
It's tangible, it's transparent. I mean, you can plug numbers in and actually make it work for any situation.
And if a developer comes in and says,
You can do the
what's it
math.
gonna cost me to
Yep,
build
Yeah.
this?
yep. Here it
You
is,
have a
right?
formula
Here's how
rather
you
than
make the
just like, oh,
computation.
let me do some percentages and.
So you're these figures, like the 1976, and then the 3551 and the 1151, are all put together for a final fee, or does
Yes.
it? Okay, so just for comparison's sakes, and I know that I'm pretty sure that we talked about this, the current level that we're at is what, for like
significantly lower.
I know, yeah, I'm
I
just.
think it's around 2,200
Okay,
per
that's,
dwelling unit.
Yeah,
yeah,
it was low.
And it depends a little bit again on that density, but I think an average,
yeah,
and maybe Chelsea has it. And I do want to throw a caveat in here, Tim, and Commission, that those numbers, that number that you talked about, derived, there's some assumptions that are made in this language right here. This isn't necessarily the final numbers. And so I want to use it a little bit of an illustrative purpose. So where I have, it costs $500,000 to develop an average neighborhood park in Hastings. I haven't done all that math yet. Did some quick math in my head. Lions Park Playground is 200 grand, right? Then I'm going to throw in a basketball court, and we're talking about 30,000. I'm going to throw in this, and we're talking about this. So super quick computation. More has to be done on that to get that final number.
sure,
More so for illustrative purposes. Same thing for the 1.5 million on a community park, and 100,000 for natural open
Yeah.
spaces.
I'm just, practically speaking, I mean, to triple,
Yep.
to move toward a tripling of the fees seems, I don't know if you do that, you scale that like over time and I don't know if it looks like that. I think about the encouraging development here in town and in those pieces, and when I see an extra $4,400 on a fee for building a home, that's a little, I don't know, that sticker shock a little bit hits me there.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, that's a big question, right? And that's why the computation of what our current level of service is.
yeah,
That's why that's so important.
Yep.
Because that's what Hastings has to offer.
Well,
And
and it's also
if
that.
new development, the philosophy is if new development comes in, they need to pay for the same. Because that's the level of service that we've had and the residents have paid for. Understandably so, right? It is,
Sure.
it's
the argument is that even with the fees lower, the parks have still been functioning. You could make that argument. Like our level of service based on what the $2,200 is, still gives us fully functioning parks. So we're talking about,
We're looking at a growth perspective.
Well,
If we
yes.
keep growing and don't collect the right funds for building the parks like they currently are,
sure,
our level of service will go down.
Right, and
The amount of parks per people will go down if we don't collect enough money to keep
Maintain and
the
grow.
amount of parks per
Right,
person,
and to say
which is
that-
what this calculation does.
to say that our level's the same, or has been functional, the one thing that I can tell you, no, it has not, out at Betts Park. It's
Well-
been suffering.
And that, I want to be clear too, the monies that are collected out of the land dedication are dedicated funds. They are not used for any operations or
Yep.
maintenance,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
Yeah, so
It's
it's,
all for capital, either acquisition or projects.
correct. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying, but so we have the level of service that we have, having charged this historically.
Having charged that and the remainder of what's not being collected through land dedication is levied to the taxpayers.
Okay, that's the clarifying piece. I'd be interested to know what that figure is. Like,
Depends year to year on
Sure.
what council's appetite is to levy for park improvements.
sure. Yeah, but the projection of that, say over a 10-year time of what was levied for on average, I think would give us a fairer picture and it maybe even a better understand, like for the objections to tripling that fee. Well, okay, taxpayers have typically paid for this, they've typically paid, I just think those numbers would help us in a case for
Just
increasing.
It's more information to put behind why it's a
Yeah.
tripling.
So
And-
I get that, and I get what you're saying. I'm playing devil's advocate a bit in that we have the level of parks that we do having paid just this. And so, but if there was money levied for, and it amounted to X number of dollars, and we could make some of that up and not have to levy the taxpayers for it, that's a selling point for me.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, just, if, for instance, the last playground replacement was Lions Park, and the city we took it out of two sources. One was park development and one was levy. I can't remember which way it went. I think 30,000 from park development and 70,000 levied. 75,000. This was 105 that the city contributed to that. Total project 210. That was the last one done. Wilson before that 70,000. That was all levy. Sure. So just in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
What about the aquatic center?
Aquatic
That-
Center is a specialty recreation facility similar to the ice arena and actually similar to the athletic complex.
So this,
So those
these
don't
funds
fall
don't
into these?
follow, these
Those-
funds wouldn't be dedicated to any of those three?
Right.
And that's always like taxpayer supported type thing, levied?
Those are levied or bonded
Bonded.
type of items.
Okay.
Outside, levy, and we do have fund balances for specifically parks in general, and the aquatic center and the ice arena.
Okay.
They have so savings accounts that we
Yeah.
can draw from to do projects at those facilities. Again, none of that can be used for operational dollars
Okay.
or operations and maintenance.
If there's a leak in the pool.
There's a leak in the
Which
pool,
time?
we can pull, kind of from that savings account if we want to.
You said that's for the arena and for the aquatic center?
We have one for arena, we have one for aquatics, and we have one for parks, kind of overall, park maintenance. Overall. I might be missing one. They have to, by city council order, they have to reach a certain level before we can spend funds from them. So they've got to cover, I think, 50% of operational costs before you can actually draw down on them, unless there's a special occasion. That would just be by rule, but we want to carry 30 or 40% of our operational costs in those.
Mm-hmm.
If something goes crazy, we can still run the aquatic center because we have a savings account for it.
Part of the thought in what we need to do tonight is dealing with the methodology of this and get ourselves to a point where, we could say we have a process in place. The numbers could change, but if this methodology is agreed to amongst the commission, then we need to step forward and say, okay, we're gonna follow this, even though knowing that somewhere along the way, those numbers might filter out some different than what we see tonight.
It's still gonna be the same formula.
The formula
I
is
think
not
the
gonna
formula is
change.
sound.
The formula sound, the numbers will change.
Right.
And that formula gives us the ability to change those numbers and still get to an end number to charge.
Right. And part of the other thing is to look at the review process. Once we can make something to move ahead on this ordinance or a rewrite of the ordinance, we have to come up with an opinion of how often do we look at this for review?
That's
And
how often do we assess the land values and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
I would suggest a minimum time frame for review, right?
Yep.
At a minimum, this commission will review it every
3 years.
X number of years. It can be reviewed more often than that, but it should be touched at least every X number of years,
Not 15?
No.
not 15.
Otherwise, that's what happens with the sticker shock is because it
Yeah.
hasn't been reviewed
Yeah.
in 15 years. So when you finally sit down and review it, if it would have been done every 2-3 years since 2003, it would have gradually gone up to match the price of land or down as the market shifts.
Good point.
But it wouldn't have been, oh, well, this $2,000 number is from 2003.
The 2003-4 estimated value of land is 32,000.
Yeah,
So it's been a big jump.
it's been a huge jump. So if we review it more frequently, I don't think you're going to see those huge jumps like that that are going to scare people.
How much do you say per land? 30?
32?
In 2003, 2004.
And now we're at 65? Oof, duh.
And to me,
Or 85 for events.
There's a lot less land.
Yeah.
yeah,
Holy cow.
I struggle with stacking all of these fees. I understand the equation, I get the math on it. I struggle with having all of these fees on top of each other. If there's And I don't, this just makes it more complex. It would seem to me that like there would be certain areas in Hastings where it would make sense for them to contribute to the neighborhood park and the natural and open space parkland based on accessibility to it. And the same is true with like a community park and then an open parkland, that you're typically do have a neighborhood park and then there's a community park that you have access to. I think to jump from $2,200 to then lumping 3 different charges, I get the change in time, but that seems significant. That's my own. And again, I agree with the math. Like, there's no issue with that. That makes sense. I just think it's hard to do that right away. So.
Part of that, I think, is, you know, the neglect of this commission to actually make a review process to say, okay, from 2003-4 time frame, you know, we've gone through 14 years, 13 years. It's like, we can't do that. You know,
Yeah.
we're doing a disservice to the community by letting that much time pass between looking at the evaluations and saying, okay, does this still work for us? Are we overpriced or are we underpriced? You know, what are we doing best for the community?
Yeah. I also do think that overall home values should be somewhere indicated in this methodology. If somebody's building a $1.5 million home on a piece of property, like, does that make sense to have them pay $6,600 like a person who's buying a $250,000 home? I mean, like that's another factor, like that I think.
We're also talking apartments.
Yeah, well,
That's a
yeah.
dwelling unit.
I think that's
Right.
yeah,
Or
sure.
condos.
But
Apartment versus a $1.5 million house, they're paying the same fee
yeah,
in this.
Because they still
Correct.
have this access to the same parks.
correct.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that's where
Is that fair or not?
Yeah, I don't. That's maybe a math thing.
It goes back to, once you go deep down the rabbit
Same
hole, how
use.
deep do you wanna go?
Same use of the facilities, right? So
Average
same
number of
cost.
people per
Yep.
household
Yeah.
is what it's based on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Shouldn't
there's-
it be
I mean-
per how much you spent on your house, because everybody gets to go use the parks?
But our national taxes say that everybody gets the same level of service, and yet some people pay more based on what they make. Like the tax system. So like if you had a bracket, I'm understanding this is gonna make everything more complex. But if somebody's building a estimated house value at 500,000, maybe that's the tier of like, you pay the 6,600. Where if it goes down, like if it's, or maybe even excess to that, to be honest. And then it's, I'm just throwing
Well,
out there another option to.
But you like even with the development that was going in here, they say they're going to have houses at a certain level, but everybody knows they sell at a different level, like of cost. So, you know, they come in saying it's going to sell at this level, but then they end up selling it at a totally different level, but they pay based on what they say they're going to sell it at, because they're going to pay coming in
Sure.
on it. So it does add a whole bunch of complexity to the whole process.
But it could slide a scale. I mean, if you set the goal of 6,600, and that was what you were trying to average amongst where the fees that people are paying per house, if people are out of a certain bracket, say $500,000, they pay $8,800, and then the person who's paying under, I don't know, like.
I think part of the way that it's explained, and I think you guys have some of that, the study from Crompton and whatnot in the slideshow. The developer is paying the fee, which ultimately the homeowner is going to pay that fee for new development. So there's a couple of ways that it can go down. The developer can get into a deal with the landowner whom they're buying the property from. Say that, well, I know what my fees are going to be going into it, so I can't give you what you're asking, here's what I can give you. Because they have their profit margin. The other part is they can take a look at the product that they're offering, and again, this is the developer. They can build a slightly smaller house and recoup some of that. And or they can simply pass it on and say, this is what it costs to buy the house that I build. Whether it's a $150,000 house or a $750,000 house. And again, the figures are based on people per household because it's the people that use the recreation facilities. So when we're adding more people, that's when it comes to, and the dwelling units is simply a way to measure the number of people per development, the average number of people per development based on acres.
I have a question. So I don't know a lot about land development, but if a contractor's coming in and gonna build houses, like, is the difference between like paying $5,500 and $6,500 gonna break the bank for them? Like, as a developer, is that a high number?
I can't speak to what the developer's thought might be on that. Again, I can say that ways to address that are to negotiate better with the land seller, to build a slightly smaller product, or
Yeah.
to
And you
own it
said
and
that
pass it along.
these fees were kind of in line with our neighbors, you think, around town, or we're not sure?
Our Dakota County peers at least have a variety of ways of computing.
Okay.
Some have significantly higher land values, just because there's fewer acres or they're closer to the metro
Sure.
or whatnot. That's why everything that I've put together here and researched and tried to use is very straightforward, is very tailorable to Hastings specifically. Because I really don't care what they're doing in Inver Grove Heights, right? It has to work for Hastings.
Yeah.
We have to be able to stand behind it as city staff and elected officials. They need to be able to stand behind something that's very rock solid and says, this is it, right? This is the number of acres of parks that we have in this category. This is the number. This is what it costs. And by the way, our Park and Rec Commission reviews it every X number of years. And by them doing that, we review it every X number of years. This is what it costs.
I know when we built our house in 2014, they said the same house built a year later would be $20,000 more because of code changes right, in the city area or county.
Yeah, the intent of this is not to gouge anybody. It is to provide the resources necessary to ensure that our park system remains at, we're able to offer the same, right? It remains at its current level of service, no matter the growth that Hastings has. There's not that much developable land right now within Hastings. Hastings is growing, but it's growing slowly. And the parkland dedication and development fee is only applicable to new developments, or if, say you own a 10-acre spot in land and you're gonna subdivide it, then at that point when you subdivide it, that's what it's gonna be. And you bring forward a site plan and whatnot. So when the land is platted, that's when the development fee comes forward. By that time, you've been through the process, you know what the density is gonna be, the size of lots, the number of dwelling units, all that sort of stuff. All that work has been done, and the formula has been known from the get-go.
When a developer comes in, are they given would they be given this right off
Yep.
the bat?
Yep, they're gonna have a checklist of all their things that they're required to do, look at, fill out, turn in.
Okay,
All the resources are provided.
got it.
And if there's a big change in something that we do, we work with the developers, and there's not that many here in town currently, so we work with them and let them know what's going on. Because it's gonna affect them, and we want to maintain positive relationships with those that do business here in town.
How conservative are these estimates on the park development fees? You think they go down once you really get into the numbers, or up, or?
It truly is, right? We've got 21 neighborhood parks, so it truly is taking a look at all of those and all of the amenities that they have in there, putting price tags to that and averaging it out.
Okay,
I'm not going to take a high end, not going to take a low end. It's going to be truly what it costs for our neighborhood parks and the
current
amenities
level of
they have.
service, as is.
As is.
Yep.
And those will all be listed out on a piece of paper with a number next to them, and anybody that asks,
Can have it.
there you go.
I think that data, along with like current levies to support like, you know, what the taxpayers are currently paying, makes this pretty rock solid methodology. Like, it really can't be disputed. If you want to continue the same level of service in new growth, this is the equation it takes to do it.
Yeah, so
And here's all the data behind it.
if a new development came in and we were to build a park in that development, just like Lions Park, it would cost
X number of dollars
X number of dollars.
Yep.
to provide the
There's-
average.
You can't make that up. It's going to cost us this dollar amount.
Yep. Yeah. So like, if you want to do another Vets Park over here, which would be a community park, we have all these numbers. Like currently, Vets Park is this many acres, and it costs
Provides
us
this many services.
Yeah, it costs 1.5 million for the park development, and then the community park fee. All that would be added up, and that's the cost to do it nowadays. Yep. Makes sense, and that'd be reviewed every 3 years at a minimum.
I'd be looking for this commission to provide a recommendation on that time frame.
Every 3 years at a minimum sounds like a good time frame to me.
2 almost sounds like too much or too often. And
Depending on what the market's like, it could be every year, but if you
Yeah.
say at a minimum,
Right.
every third year, it has to be done.
Right.
Can we say if there's a market shift of 20% or more within
I think we
2
could review
years?
it whenever we wanted to.
Yeah.
Is there
We just
somebody
have
watching that?
To do it, whatever's written down.
Yeah, I think we make it, we have to do it. I don't know, is four is probably too far spread apart. I mean, 3 does sound like a pretty optimal number.
I'd go with 3.
So, what we will be looking for, right, the commission action requested is review and approve proposed methodologies for calculating the level of service, physical land dedication, fee in lieu of land, and park development fee calculations. So what I'm asking commission to do is, again, to review it, as we've been doing, and ultimately approve it, or make any modifications to it at this time. Not to say that this is gonna be set in stone forever, but I need a direction to move forward with.
Practical question.
Yes.
Is helping set these fees one of our 36 top responsibilities? Like if you were to I'm being facetious.
Sure.
I know that you're not, yeah, it's 35. Like, but like, I think of 3 years, if this is gonna be on the docket, it's gonna be a significant conversation. It's gonna take up one of the slots for that. Does that carry that importance, or is it farther out than that?
I think it carries that importance and a little bit more even.
Perfect.
It is on the list of 3 or 4 items that this commission was going to tackle in 2018.
Yep.
So you as a commission
Yep.
decided that those were the things that you were going to
Yep.
focus on.
So going forward though, does it,
I think it's a high priority item,
okay,
always.
there we go.
I do.
Perfect.
Because it is a fee that we're passing along to a developer, ultimately a homeowner.
Sure.
Sensitive to that.
Yep.
Understand it. And we have the responsibility to make sure that we're accurate with that.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's our commission's goal to keep the level of service of parks in this community the same or better,
There we go.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so for us to tackle number 2, approving a methodology of calculating the level of service, if we wanted to make a motion on that for tonight, do we need to expand the calculations to include a sliding scale for high density where it's $85,000 for
I don't
acreage?
think
Do
so.
we think we need to do that? 'Cause I don't think so either.
I don't.
Do we need to factor in the cost of the homes in the area?
I don't.
Because those are the 2 sticking points that I got out of this conversation as far as, does this methodology make sense? That was the only 2 real big questions that I got out of that whole thing. As far as do we need
Yeah.
to make adjustments to this specific calculated plan?
I think it's worth the conversation on a sliding scale based on perceived home value, but it's not like a sticking point for me, because I think the methodology makes sense, so.
So we could, theoretically, we could motion to accept this as it sits.
Yes.
Obviously with getting more accurate numbers for the cost of the $500,000 park, but those are numbers
There's just
that
numbers
could
now.
change 6 months from now anyway.
Yes.
This is
And-
just performing A times B plus C equals.
But they can't change, they do have to have, before they can be formally agreed to, there does have to be like a, this is what we understand to be
Yes.
the.
The action tonight is to solidify direction for staff.
We need
That
to tell them
yes-
that this is what we need to this
Yes,
methodology so they
this
can
is
move
the-
forward with it.
Correct. Yes, this is the methodology that we want you to move forward with, or no, this is not.
Okay.
Or yes, it is, and I want you to look at this specific item. And I would ask for specifics and not generalities.
Well, the specifics are, is it really $500,000 to me?
I already told you. That those numbers are column placeholders at this point in time.
So the column placeholders need to be
They will be solidified
They
more
will be.
solidified.
before a final draft of a new parkland dedication.
We'll be
Ordinance.
Yeah,
reviewing
we're
it.
solidifying the
When we
equation
do
right
the-
now, not the input
Right,
numbers.
so,
the
so
equation.
this methodology of the
Yep.
equation makes sense. So do we have to motion, is that what we need to
Yes.
do?
Yes.
So then I'm gonna motion that we accept this methodology.
I second that
Final
motion.
numbers in there.
Okay, do we want any more discussion on the methodology? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll oppose it for now, simply on the grounds of
That's fine.
the couple of the numbers and whatnot.
No problem.
4-1. Commission will accept this methodology. The next one?
Very good.
Oh, how often do we want to review? We could tackle that tonight too.
Oh, I thought you guys said 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
We
it's,
didn't- we didn't
I
motion
motion
it.
for a minimum of 3-year renewals.
I'll second.
Alright.
Any further
Reviews.
discussion? Okay. Commission recommends a minimum of 3 years review.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, 3 years.
The thing we didn't get to was the 5. The time frame.
Yeah, do you want to hold that back, or do you guys want to try and decide on that now?
Yeah, what?
What were we talking
It's
about?
after 8.
The timeframe in which the fees that are collected should be spent.
I don't know if I
Oh.
feel knowledgeable enough to make a solid recommendation because I don't have anything.
And my notes have that I need to do a little bit of peer review on that too, so we'll
Can
hold
we
that.
hold that till the next
Can
meeting?
we-
The only question
Yeah.
I'll have on
We're
that
holding
right
number
now
5
is,
until next time.
would it make sense to do that within a certain number of years of that, the development area being completed?
Or when they start construction, when they complete it?
That's
I
where
think that's a topic for when we have
more
That
a better
discussion.
handle on that.
Right, that's why that's the only
Maybe
question I can really think
review
of,
that
that
when.
part of his exploration might be helpful.
Commission, I know we usually take about an hour, hour and a half of your time on any given evening. I want to check in with it being 8:15, how you guys are doing on time, I would be respectful of that.
I have to run,
Okay,
so I'm just letting you know.
very good. So with that, number 4 on the agenda, Parks and Recreation Revenue and Pricing Policy Update and Review. I will give you a quick update, and I will ask that commission review that on your own. And I may even reach out and see if there's a small group of 2, maybe 3 commissioners that want to get together with me and really dive deep into this. But what this is just as it says, a revenue and pricing policy. So I've constructed this as kind of a high-level policy for our department as a whole. So this deals with everything from a swim lesson to renting the ice arena to hosting a tournament at a ball field to a yoga class. All of that.
We
And
dove
we have-
pretty deep into that at our work session, right?
We did.
Yeah.
We got some recovery, cost recovery goals, again, minimums that we would like to reach. And just kind of as a note, those goals are how we would budget for a program, how we would budget for concessions, all those sorts of things. And just know that there's always gonna be some outliers because of what the market will bear. We might not be able to charge $19 for a hot dog at the pool. Just saying. But, just like you can get a beer at a Twins game for $8 because that's the only beer you can get, and you want one at the Twins game, it costs 25 cents, right?
Maybe
It's
not
the
even.
actual cost.
Yeah.
So,
There's something to be said. I mean, if you have reasonable cost concessions at these events, more people will show up.
sure.
I mean, it's
Yep.
supply and demand.
But generally what I'm asking commission to do is review it, and I want to bring this back in December, and I want to get some commission action. I'll be asking for action at that time, is to put this thing into place.
Do we have a time in next month for a workshop session?
It sounds like Dave wants to sign up for a subcommittee.
I'd sign up for the subcommittee if I'm
I
available.
mean, that's fine, I just think it's important enough
I do too.
that we tackle a little bit harder at this.
Sure.
I'd be
So-
happy to do a workshop session, provided
Okay.
this thing works out.
It'll work out. So I'll reach
Also, I'm
out
not
to the
opposed to
three of
possibly
you
meeting
individually.
on a weekend if it's necessary,
Okay.
because I work,
Yep.
so.
I'll reach out to the three of you
Just-
individually, and we'll set something up.
Very good.
Okay. Do you have some brief updates before you go? You got a few
No.
minutes yet? Okay. One, we have a solar-powered light at the dog park. We just
Yeah.
have one.
Way cool.
We just have one. This is a trial. We're working on it. We're seeing if this is the right fixture. We're seeing if this is one. And again, we only have one, so we could only put it in one place, right? But we can turn it, we can turn up the intensity, all those sorts of things. So we're just borrowing it from somebody right now. We'll keep an eye on that.
Is it better than the streetlights out there, so?
It's nice.
It's LED. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what
We-
spectrum
it's-
of light it's on.
You
It's
drive
probably
by
around
there the
4,000.
other night and there were 3 vehicles with their lights on shining.
Yeah, this isn't a ginormous
No,
light.
it's baby light, it's just a test.
The
Just a
intent
test.
is
Right.
also just to provide enough lighting that you can walk around safely. It's not athletic field lighting.
No, I understand that, I just was curious, I thought maybe it wasn't working right.
It might not have been. So, that's why we're just testing it.
It's better than nothing, it's a step in the right direction.
That's right.
Get some lighting out there. It's dark at 4:30, I appreciate it.
On solar lights too, so this commission is aware, it's something I've been working on probably for the last month here with the US Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers. The overlook we have on the Mississippi River Trail, down by where the bridge was built, that green thing you can walk out to. On the upstream side and the downstream side, they're concrete structures called dolphins. So that's where the boats used to moor up. We have navigation lights on top of those. The city owns them. They're currently the wrong color. They're red, and they should be green, because it's red right returning. So you're going upriver, all the red lights should be on your right-hand side. We did that at the request of the Coast Guard about 4 years ago, changed them from green to red. This has been fun. Long story short, they had Hastings facility listed as the facility in St. Paul. It's at a totally different river mile marker and on the opposite bank.
Oh.
So that's why we got the light confusion. So down in New Orleans, they had the Hastings structure in St. Paul, and we've been receiving direction from them on what lights to put on it. So we got her
For
all
quite some
cleared up.
time.
They're paying for it then?
No, we got her all cleared up, and I've got the lights sitting in my office. I'm just waiting to get back out with the fire department and
So
get
they're
on
gonna be
the-
green?
Yep.
That's just a change of the lens, right? Or is
No,
it
it's
a
a
whole light?
it's a whole light fixture itself.
Really?
It's a solar powered light structure that we can set the flash sequence and all sorts of good stuff on.
Cool.
Kind of fancy.
Really, it's all
It
solar
sounds
powered.
fancy.
Yep. So I think it's like a 0.3 second on flash and 2.2 off. So it
Okay.
doesn't take much juice.
Okay.
But
LED?
Probably
LED.
Cool.
need something to vote captains.
Just briefly wrapping up the pool stuff. I know it seems a little bit late for that, but there's some final draining and blowdown that we do in that pool to make sure that we do our best to make sure that everything won't freeze or anything will freeze.
There's typically tarps over those canvas covers.
Yeah, we're not doing that again.
Again? Also, I saw that the slide was redone.
Yeah,
Why would we redo that right before winter?
because that's when the contractor could do it. It doesn't really make any difference when they do it. The product will hold. So
For how many years? Is it
that
guaranteed?
is about a 7-year fix, is what they're saying. So that was a new paint on the exterior and gel coat and recolor on the interior of it. So they're a nice dark blue now. They're not the faded blue, but they came and did both the big slide and the drop
It
slide.
looks nice.
In our 2019
does.
budget is a play structure reconditioning. So kind of the same thing.
I'd really like to see that climbing wall actually go up and out.
We
Have you been to other parks where they have climbing walls that are actually hard to go up?
Yeah, we are restricted a little bit in what we can do because of the required area around it.
Okay.
So we're just squeezing in where it is. That 4-foot wide panel is
Yep.
about all we could do. Yeah.
Dangerous
Minnesota Pool
conditions.
Code. The arena season is ramping up here. Both the sheets of ice are going strong. All sorts of hockey stuff out there. So if you got a chance, get out there and go see some stuff.
We've been skating.
You've been skating out there?
Avery skates on Saturdays.
Oh, okay. And then the Glendale Park, you guys saw maybe the updates in the city council updates last week. I have this commission's recommendation, and I'll be working through another commission or committee or whatnot to ask some more questions, basically bringing that recommendation forward and seeing what ultimately becomes of that. So that's kind of where that's at. And then we'll probably look to bring Phil in December. I gotta double check with him. Just wrote it down. I don't want to voluntold him, but try and bring him in and have him review what his leagues and whatnot from the summer. Well, spring, summer, and fall actually.
I have one final question.
Yes, ma'am.
I think most of our terms are up January 1st. Do we just automatically renew? Or how does that work?
Paige and I'll check on
Okay.
everybody's.
Because it's 2 years, right?
2-year terms.
It'll be 2 years, so I know for you and I.
3 consecutive 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I guess what I would ask is an affirmative answer, whichever way. Affirmative, I plan to continue, or
Okay.
affirmative, I plan to not
You
continue.
don't have to like re-interview or anything.
Nope.
Yeah.
And we are down one commissioner, so we'll be looking for that person here starting pretty soon.
We can get a hold of you along the way and let you know one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I didn't know if it needed to be more official than that.
Nope. And that would be for me, unless somebody else has anything, the conclusion of our.
Paige, do you have anything?
Motion to adjourn.
A second that motion.
Meeting adjourned.
In favor?
You don't need to do that.
It's not
I'm
bad.
seeing if you